Yo, we're here. We're back. New week. Wish it was over already. But it's not. So we're here. What's going on? We're here. Exactly. Asta. Howdy. How you doing? All right, something new today. Something new. We're going to rework some old work. Yeah, we got a painting from easily over 10 years ago. Easily. Like, maybe even it could be about 14 or 15 years ago that I painted this. That we're going to rework. So yeah, I'm going to sort of critique it first, and then talk about what the intention was when I first made it, and then maybe how that isn't so successful or is successful, and then we'll kind of come up with a new version of it, and we'll see what shape that's going to take. So yeah, that's going to be pretty exciting. But first of all, we have, as usual, old paintings that slap. And do I have one that slaps for you today? Yo, what's up, Danny? What's up, Yukino? How you doing? So the old painting that slaps today is one of my favorites from Antonio Mancini. Here is the painting. This painting is amazing. It is very, very, very thick impasto painting in oil paints, and it is incredibly impressionistic. I can't find a much better version of this painting, but you can see here with the bottle, at least the transparent parts of the bottle aren't even painted. Like he has basically just painted the highlight and reflections on this, and yeah, it is incredibly impressionistic. Like when you are zoomed out, you know, the sort of coalescing color marks sort of come together to form the scene. But yeah, on much closer inspection, it is really just thick paint that's been slapped on there. So yeah, really amazing. Should really check out his work. He actually was taking like mercury for something, and ended up going a bit insane. And in doing so, kind of developed a really, really crazy way of painting. He would, you can sort of see it in the bottom corner here. There's this sort of kind of implied lines. Hang on, let's get a solid brush. There's these kind of lines here that you can see through the painting, where the painting is kind of starting to see these. So what he would do is he would have his canvas like this, and on his canvas he would have all of these strings stretched over it, like he would draw a grid on something, right? Like this. And then his subject, in this case, like the lady in bed here, she's here, she would have a frame in front of her, like a wooden frame that had these same strings on it. And he would add strings for sort of, you know, keeping the drawing intact. And he'd have identical ones over the canvas, except that he was painting very thickly on the canvas, and he would end up painting the strings into the image. So a lot of his paintings actually still have the string in the oil paint. and they are extremely thick. Like, you know, some of them have bits that are a few centimeters deep of oil paint in them. Let's see if I can find another example for you with the strings. But yeah, this is kind of how he kept a track of the drawing and placement of things within the painting. And obviously, as he was, you know, getting essentially mercury poisoning, this became like a real fixation of his. And some of his later works are like, incredible thick painting with these strings like trapped inside. I have a book with his paintings at home, and there's some really cool examples in there. There's even some photos in there of the kind of string construction thing that he would use. I'm trying to see if there's a picture online anywhere, but I kind of see. Here's a good example. Again, these are really low res. What is it with the internet and low res photos? Again, this is a bit clearer, but you can see here where the grid exists within the painting. So pretty cool. So there you go. That is today's old painting. That slaps. It does indeed slap. You love the highlights on the bottles? I love the highlights on the bottles. Bottom line, do drugs, it'll make you a great artist. It'll do something. It'll do something. Hi, Alex. Hi, everyone. Hi, Peekaboo. Deep fries. Hard slap. Exactly. Hard slap. Heath approved. Antonio Mancini. Don't take mercury. I think he was taking mercury for syphilis. I think. Don't quote me on that. So anyway, moving on from the old painting that slaps. We have today. Yeah, we had the vote in the Discord, in the public Discord. I did also put the vote in my other Discord, but I'm going to go with the public one, seeing as you guys are the public. And we have 16 votes for the painting that we're going to do today. Well, start today. And it is this one. So this, like I said, is a painting that I did definitely over 10 years ago. And yeah, it's gotta be like maybe 12 or 14 years ago that I did this. And yeah, you guys voted for this one to be one that I revisit and redo. So we're going to do that. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of context as to like what was going on. And what the intention was when I started to paint this. So I wanted to do I believe I actually called this one Last Stand, and I wanted to have like an image, of course, with this knight who is having his last stand against these kind of tendrils, insectoid, worm type, swamp dwelling, whatever. Many swamp dwelling sort of worm type things. And this would be his last stand, and he's, more than likely not going to make it. And that was the intention of this. when I painted it at the time. And the thing is, there are things I still like about this. You know, I do kind of like the sort of glowiness of the sword. Kind of adds a little bit of drama to it. And yeah, I don't mind the sort of more impressionistic sort of looser painting either. But I feel like the struggle that this guy should be feeling, or the sort of dire straits that he's in, aren't felt so much outside of him being kind of quite crowded in the composition. But otherwise, I think there's a little bit of a lack of drama, maybe a lack of emotion to come from it. I think he's in armor, so we don't get a facial expression for this, and I think that's still something that I would keep out of the rework. I don't necessarily think we need to see his face, but I feel like the acting and the sort of desperateness of the situation could maybe be played into a bit more with the pose and so on. So so yeah, I think that could be something to be worked on. I also think that the kind of the lighting on this, there's a sort of ambiguous bottom light in here, which is in the scene but isn't really motivated by anything. It's just kind of hidden by the sort of tendril bits in the front. So maybe we could figure out a better way of that working. And yeah, I think maybe be worth trying like a different angle, a different shot for this. So yeah, I think those are kind of the points, I guess, that I would address going forward with this one. And now it's just about kind of in what way should I execute this, or at least start getting the ball rolling on some idea of how to redo this. And yeah, given that we have a picture here and we have a kind of a color palette, and that, I think maybe initially what I would do is sort of do some very quick and dirty kind of painting to maybe sort of try and visualize quickly an idea for the shot. And then once I sort of have something that I think, okay, that this is kind of the idea that I'd like to go into, I would then maybe jump into a little bit of 3D, make some very kind of loose tentacle shapes, maybe even pose a mannequin, and yeah, so sort of see what that offers in terms of finding the right shot. And then yeah, we'd take that into Blender, throw a couple of lights on it, bit of mist, and maybe then use that as the basis for our painting, or at least as a reference for our painting. So yeah, we'll start off with a bit of just basically loosey-goosey painting, and yeah, we'll go from there. And obviously, if you guys have got any questions along the way, I'm all ears. I'll happily get into those. And yeah, let's just have a fun, relaxing time. Yo, Sarah, what's up? I find it hard to imagine how this piece could be improved, so this will be fascinating to watch and hear your thought process. I mean, there's a lot that could be improved in here. You know, ultimately, it's just very rough, you know. And I'm actually quite fond of the armor design. I'm kind of a bit surprised, considering like my painting at the time was very messy and stuff. It kind of it feels like okay. So I surprised myself a little bit there. I feel like these tentacle things as well. I'd really want to sort of play up the design of them a little bit. I think in here, these ones that sort of seem to have like a bit of a more of a hand kind of shape, or at least some kind of way of grabbing things, some sort of fingers and so on. I think that's quite an interesting idea, that isn't in here. Like some of these seem to be just kind of like snails, and I do like the sort of sacks on some of these as well. They're kind of quite interesting, but yeah, I like it still. It's just, I think there's things that we could do. Very blobular. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like there needs to just be a bit more of a struggle involved. Overall. Let me just copy and paste this so I've got it up in the corner. And let's... So my initial kind of thing here is just going to be taking this color palette and kind of doing a rough kind of paint over, if you like, of where I think I would want to go with this, and then we can figure out the best way to execute this. I just really want to make it felt that like he's actually in a really bad spot, and that this is actually the final stand. And also maybe just make it a little bit more dramatic in that sense. We'll try and make that happen. It very much reminds me of that scene from Peter Jackson's King Kong, where they're sort of in that ravine. I think they fall down after getting like stampeded by dinosaurs, I think. And they sort of fall down into like a ravine, and all of these insects come out, and they're sort of fighting them in the mud. I think Andy Serkis gets his head swallowed by some kind of horrible worm thing. Kind of gives me those kind of vibes. So here we go. My sort of initial thought with this is to be something where he was reaching up for like a big kind of overhead slash with the sword, but his arm has been kind of grabbed by one of these things. So the arm's been grabbed already, and it's kind of thrown him a little bit off balance for the hit. he's being grabbed round the waist. Maybe there's even... And I still want to keep this sort of circular motion going that this had. There's a nice continuing of the motion of those things that comes with that. Give him a bit more breathing room with the arm. So I'm leaning in this kind of direction initially, but we'll see. Battle of the Bastards, is that? That's Game of Thrones, isn't it? That's never got into it, gotta say. Hang on. I think Photoshop just crashed on me, or at least this part of the file. 1 second. We'll just close it. F. Yeah, exactly. Arnar. Arnar Photoshop. That's all it takes. That's all it takes. Atari Nar. A bottle of water. I need to get a bottle of water. Yeah. Yeah. They'll do that. They'll do that. They really need water though. What were you doing in Germany? Where did you go? A bottle of water. I did art for an indie card game, and they invited me to the launch and had me signing them. It was crazy. Oh, very nice. That's great. Very cool indeed. Where did you go? Berlin. Bremen. Okay. Don't know that. Okay. It's alright. It might not look like much, but this I'm just like sussing this out in my head right now. But yeah, I think let's try. Yeah. Oh, and kind of like the idea that these tentacles are coming from different things. They're not all necessarily the same thing. Different species of swamp beastie. like, oh no. Oh no, the swamp beasts are after me. Well, tough break, buddy. Oh no, the swamp. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they gotta be engulfing the guy. Yeah, maybe there's even one like up here. Just more of a struggle, you know. Yeah, I think like the overhead swing can still work. It's just I think it needs to feel a bit more constricted, you know, like the swing's not going to work out because there's so much grab assing going on. Grabbing the end of the blade, yeah. That would really mess it up. Kind of something like... The swing that never was. The swing that needed to be. The swing we deserved. Misery. Yeah. I know. I feel like as well, I'd maybe want to do this on sort of like on a lens that gave us a lot more space between the night and the tentacles. And that way we can sort of see several layers of them, like all writhing in. Not just ones directly in front, but a desperate last stand. Yeah, something more along these lines, maybe. I'm sort of looking at. I'll do it in yellow here, but I'm looking at kind of this sort of shape, you know, and there's the motion of the body that's in here, and then we'd have lots of kind of countering, you know, motions. But I'm trying to sort of get an idea of, you know, this kind of swirl and constriction going on, like a, you know, it should feel kind of claustrophobic, I guess is the word. Like they should feel kind of formidable, but they're in way over their head, you know. So he's still trying desperately till the very end. You know, it was just a fatal error. You know, but a lot of things lead to this point for the guy, you know. Yeah. He's doomed to repeat. The autosave made him come back to this point. He saved at the wrong checkpoint. Soft locked. Yeah, exactly. Doomed to repeat. But yeah, I think we could work with this. We could work with this. All right. Yeah, I think we with this in mind, we hop into 3D. Put a few tentacles down. Put a mannequin in there and try and see like what this idea looks like with an actual space. And start to go from there. Let me just open up 3D code. So yeah, in Photoshop here, just basically just like feeling out the idea. Just trying to be like, where it at? And then here, what we'll do is we'll basically get a few things in here that we need. And then we can really start figuring out the space. So let's give him a swamp. Little swamp platform. That doesn't need to be very high poly at all. Okay, and let's quickly kind of roughly pose this dude. Whoa. He can have a little swamp as a tree. Yeah, just a little. He just needs a little swamp surface, you know. So I like this mannequin because you just move any part you like, but they're all kind of parented together, so it makes sense for moving stuff around. Ooh. It doesn't ultimately need to be super accurate because we're going to draw over it later on. But if I can get a sense of the pose, all right, we'll give him a very basic sword. Sick. Okay. A little sword for the guy. That layer needs to be much higher resolution. Where is that? There we go. That's much better. It brought it in as like a couple of blobs because the resolution of the layer wasn't high enough. Okay. That looks okay. So, tentacles, tentacles. It's going to be one of those images. you gotta have sound effects. Whoa. Let's make these green and gloopy, shall we? Ugh. Has those little ZBrush style Z-sphere thingies. I've been looking for another program that lets you use that as a base before sculpt. Yeah, no, it's really good. These ones are pretty crazy as well because what you can do, if I'm, for example, start making a new one here. It's worrying me that this one's invisible and I don't know why. Yeah, so if I make this new one here, you can choose these like splines, right? So if I choose this one, dun dun dun, you see it's tentacles. But I could choose like these. So if I was making a spring or a chain or yeah, anything, and you can make your own ones of these. Like anything you sculpt, anything you sculpt, you can turn into a spline, like these. So you can do all sorts of stuff, which is pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty sick. So, yeah, so there's all these ones. I just want to go back to normal. Normal, please. What are these? Ooh. Yeah, kind of cool. Don't know where the normal one's gone now. I don't know how to reset it. Yeah, we'll use this one as soon as we're doing tentacles. Ah. Okay. Yeah, we make a few more, and then I can kind of use these ones that I already have, duplicate them around a bit. And this way we can just get a better sense of space when we're like doing the composition. Yeah. Yeah. We can even get a better frame up as well. Should really put these on our... Let's move my keyboard closer. Yeah, so Castonia, what's going on? Yeah, we'll... Nothing much. How are you? What's the plan for this piece? So we are actually redoing an old piece. We're redoing this one from many years ago. And yeah, we started off here in Photoshop, just basically having a little think about the composition, how to reframe it, and yeah, now I'm just hopped into 3D to further that process, really. Yeah, to further that process, really. I'm gonna sneeze. Bless you. Thanks. Thanks, guys. I have been blessed indeed. Seems that way. Seems that way. My man getting tied up. He's having a bad day with it. Come on now. Yeah, bad April Fools for my dude. Whoa. Came to think, what if there's one of these tentacles that has been cut and now either burns up or something to hint magical? So yeah, it's a good idea. We can definitely have something like that. Okay, let's see if we can get away with just duplicating some of these. Duplicate. Man's having the worst day. When I'm kind of looking at this one as if like this was the one he intended to hit. But it's all going a bit Pete-tong. You gotta lurk? No worries. Lurking is fine. You're forgiven. Sting. Lurking's fine. You may lurk. Obviously, we can paint the shapes of these more than they appear here, but I'm just looking to see. Yeah, that could be kind of cool. Like this angle could be kind of cool. This angle could also be kind of cool. Just wondering, yeah, we need a few more tentacles, I think. Whoa, shit. Obviously, when we get this in Blender, we can move these things around a bit more. What I'm trying to do is, if you remember with the snow temple one that we did, trying to, at the moment, conceive of maybe like a couple of shots that there could be. So there could be this one, where he's sort of looking at this tentacle as the one he was going to chop. We can also sort of see it from this side as well, which is kind of cool. Are there any other angles that kind of work? I guess this one, nah, not really. I've got nice overlaps is what I'm kind of into. I guess I could draw the rest of them in. Okay, right, I'm going to quickly put you on face cam, and we'll save this out for a sec, and then we'll see how this is going to look. Kind of lit. Litty. So let me just save all of these out and export it, and then we'll open them up in a Blender. See what happens from there. Blender. Okay, I'm quickly save this. Okay, now we'll export it. Okay, we'll call this swamp scene. And we're not going to decimate it. Yeah. So what this will be cool for is we can put it in Blender. We can kind of get a different camera on it and throw in some lighting, a bit of atmospherics, and just see if we can kind of find the composition with the lighting and then go from there. So almost there. Sorry, I'm just exporting all this and opening everything up. Don't want to open client files by accident. Embarrassing. Okay, let's see. Import FBX. Okay, it's in Blender. I will show you in 1 second. Okay, brill. We back. So here it is, the scene in Blender. So let's get a couple of things going, shall we? So we're going to look through the camera. And let's try, where are we? Being silly. Let's try a bit of a wider lens. Let's go 30 for now. What does that even look like if we go even more? No, not quite. And let's go with a bit of a, go for a 21.9. Because I do love a 21.9. 21.9 aspect ratio. No, we might have to move some tentacles around, but what I quite like about something like this is like the real depth we can get. Okay, well, let's throw a couple of lights on first. Let's get some shape in there, but and then we might have to move some tentacles around. We'll see. We'll see. So yeah, before in the scene, we had like a sort of a glow from the front, which ultimately didn't make a ton of sense because it wasn't coming from anything. And I'm thinking about, you know, how the lighting could work in this scene and like what different lightings would do for the kind of the storytelling, if you like. And we could, for example, place the light behind or a light behind like this and get a nice kind of rim light that picks out shapes. And then we could have like a light, kind of a soft area light that comes from the front, which kind of picks up forms a little bit, right? But this top down one as well is quite nice, like this, because it's quite oppressive. You get like, you know, very clear shadows from the top like this. And from the front, something like this, we're getting these nice long shadows across it, which again could be quite nice for the depth. You see that how the tentacles are casting shadows on it, and that really sort of makes him feel, you know, a bit more surrounded. You know, there's like a different mood, I guess. Like this one with the light behind, it picks out silhouettes nicely, right? But it could make it feel quite heroic. Or something like this feels quite oppressive, right? From above. And then something from the front like this, it almost has that kind of feeling of like flash photography. Like the flash is coming from the camera. So it has that kind of horror-y kind of vibe. So yeah, we can try a few things out with that. If we're gonna have the sword glowing as well, we should put that in. Uh, um, actually, I actually can't remember how to do that bit, so I'll have to leave that. Derp. There is a sequence of things you need to do to make something emissive, and I can't remember what it is at this moment in time, so I'll do it. I'll do it later. Okay, let's scale up this cube. So that it encompasses our entire scene. And just show that as a wireframe so we can still see our thing. And then we're going to delete this. Shift A, add principled volume, connect those volume nodes, and let's just make this, yeah, kind of green right now. Okay, and then we'll turn the density down to 0.07. Let's have a look. Ooh. Okay. That's giving us a bit of volumetric light right there. Looks kind of cool, like that, backlit like that, doesn't it? With the shadows coming forward. Yeah, interesting. Interesting. It is a lot of fun, like being able to move around a scene like this. I know it's not a drawing. It is 3D, but it is kind of it's pretty cool to sort of, be able to think of something quickly mock it up and then start messing around with lights and stuff. It's really quite cool. Okay, so let's make a new material for these. And we'll just make them kind of dark yellowy green. Let's turn the roughness down so we get a little bit of a highlight. And then we can just make all these dudes that material for now. And like the design of these tentacles, I will like do in Photoshop because I want them to have like some of them to have kind of more fingery bits, some of them to have kind of like pustules on them and all that kind of thing. Which, yeah, you could sculpt, right, if you wanted to make a completely 3D scene. But for the purposes of this, you know, we're not going to need that. Because I'll just, you know, I want to paint over all of this. Oosh. Okay, and then we'll make another new material for this guy. And he's going to have kind of like a dark rough, dark metallic kind of thing, because he was wearing kind of a gold armor, right, in the OG. So we'll just give him a bit of that for now. And then, yeah, we'll make another new material for this. Go with a slightly sort of yellowy, swampy thing. And again, we'll turn the roughness down. Don't want it super metallic, actually. And then, yeah, when I can remember how to make this emissive. Actually, we don't need to make it emissive for the purposes of this. That's actually not. But yeah, you can make it a light in and of itself. Okay, now let's have a look. We will do Shift A, search for an environment texture. Do this here. It's a nice pink environment right now. Let me just put you guys here while I open up an HDRI. I'm just importing an HDRI. And this will just give me some ambient lighting. If I can find it. There we go. There we go. Why won't I open it? What is going on? Sorry, I'm just trying to locate an HDRI. And it can't find it for some reason. And it's found it. Okay. Crisis averted. Welcome back. So I have an HDRI. It's just an environment, right, of an overcast kind of day, but it just is going to give me some ambient lighting. And I will turn the strength of it kind of right down, but it's just going to give like a little bit of extra color and light in here, which is going to be useful. So I'm thinking we can have maybe a backlight in here, and then I'm going to add another light source. An area light. Just trying to get a little bit of a highlight along the edges of the form. On the front faces, because that'd be quite handy. GZ. Yo, what's up, Jonah? Welcome, welcome. I am just trying to frame up this shot in Blender here. Back in Blender, I see the backlighting is looking really sick. Yeah, I do like backlighting. Let's see if we can. Okay. Let's do mist light. Okay, just want to show you this quickly. Render image. Actually, we want ambient occlusion, bloom, screen space reflections. There we go. And then see this, I feel like is quite helpful at this point, right? To have this pass. If I just quickly do a render preview, right? So yeah, I've got this shot. Quite nice, right? It could be nice to paint over. But if I wanted to be even more simple about it, or let's say like, yeah, not use this as it was because it's got a lot of information in it, but let's say I want to like work the composition up more to take into painting, what you can do is take this mist pass, right? And because it doesn't have any of the information that the full render has, it's just, you know, black and white with depth. You could take this and paint over this more, figure out, you know, your tentacle shapes and silhouettes and all that kind of stuff here. So even if you don't end up using like the full render, and you just use, you know, something like this to then have shapes to work with, you know, you can get a lot of value out of something like this already. But yeah, I like looking at all of these different passes. Even this, right? Could be really good. But then we look at all of the combined. So yeah, all right. Let's take one of these. I'm just going to save this. Save as. And we'll call this Swamp Night Rework. Okay, and then I'm very quickly going to just pop to the bathroom while this renders out. And then we can talk about this more. Render. Okay, we'll just take a screenshot of this actually. Don't even need to render it. Okay. Back to Photoshop. And then, yeah, I'll just very quickly pop to the bathroom. And then we'll come back and talk about this and do some painting. Talk about what we would change. So I'll just leave you with this in Photoshop for now. All right, be right back. Yo, geez. I'm back. Thanks for your patience. All right, so we've got it back here in Photoshop. And yeah, I just wanted to bring it back into Photoshop at this point. We can talk about like why, I guess, how to kind of use a workflow like this and not get kind of like bogged down with the 3D, but also, you know, why switch between different things like this. And I think the reason why I'd like to sort of switch around and go through something like this is to, you know, use each program for what they're really good for, and not have to kind of struggle to get something out of one thing and then prolong the process, right? So initially, you know, I start in here, and I'm kind of scribbling out the idea. I'm kind of thinking, okay, I'm looking at this. I'm thinking how do I want to frame it up? I'm thinking about the acting of the character, etc. And it's nice and free to just sort of sketch in Photoshop, right? There's not too much barrier to that. You can scribble around. It's a kind of easy way to sort of conceive of an idea initially, right? And then, I do a few scribbles and versions of that, and I form the idea in my head, but I don't actually have to like fully draw it out. Eventually culminating in just sort of scribbling over everything with the yellow and just being like, okay, I kind of see where I'm going with this. So then from here, I hop over to 3D coat, because I'm like, okay, I generally know what I'm looking for now. And what I really need is to be able to sort of see the space that everything's taking up, the three-dimensional space that everything's going to take up in the scene, and basically sort of build that scene out really quickly. Now I could stay here and draw this stuff, except that one, that takes a while, and two, like my drawing, I don't feel is like one of my strongest points. And so if I jump into something like 3D coat and like pose a mannequin and like build a few of those tentacles and whatnot, I can very quickly get an idea of the space, and the composition, and I find that really helpful. So then that basically serves the purpose of the drawing in that sense, like the 3D part of it. And as you can see, the 3D is by no means like sophisticated in any way, but it is helping to sort of see the space, and the foreshortening of certain things, especially like this tentacle, I feel like is much easier to achieve in 3D than painting it. It might take me a while to sort of hit on doing this complicated shape and foreshortening. But then, so what's nice about sticking it in Blender then is that you have the ability to put in lights, a bit of texture, some mist, and now I'm getting a much more of an idea of like what the full composition could look like. Okay. So at this stage, there's like a couple of things that we can do. One is like I brought it back in Photoshop, and what I aim to sort of do here is sort of go over it, just with a brush, and sort out anything that I'm not happy with. And at that point, either decide, okay, I'm going to hop back into 3D and do something in the 3D, or I'm going to like get the renders out of Blender at this point and continue it in Photoshop, and like paint over everything and do it that way. So I'm just going to sort of critique this, if you like, now, so that you can hear my thoughts on like what there is that I would change on this right now, and whether those things are something that I would do in Photoshop as I paint, or would I go back to the 3D and add those things in. So let's have a little look. So let's just talk about the pose of the character for now. What I would like is a little bit more gesture in the posing, and maybe even a slight bit more sort of exaggeration, if you like, of the pose. So if I just sort of draw in here a kind of a wireframe almost for my character, I'm looking for a little bit more of this kind of gesture in the arm and the body, something that has a bit more kind of curvature to it, but also just energetic lines. There's something that is missing from just the mannequin that I'd really want to see in here, which is just, curves, converging lines, a kind of an energy and sort of gesture to the body. I think I would like a slight bit more kind of tipping to the head, so the center line being slightly more off, so that this line of action, of sight rather, goes more into this kind of tentacle that he's looking at right now. So that's something with the pose. He wants to feel a little bit more strung out, I guess. In here, I think another thing that I'm looking at, and we do these in a different color, is that this is quite nice coming out from the foreground. I would probably look to make this a little bit sort of thicker near the bottom here. And I might even want to play up some of these curves a little bit more, like give this a little bit more sort of thick to thin and gesture. It's nice the way it goes into space and back out, but I think I would want to put a bit more sort of stylization, if you like, on these shapes. Something that would be much easier to paint now than sculpt. So again, using Photoshop and the advantages there of being able to paint over it, rather than spending time going back into the 3D for that. But I just want a bit more shape to it. Like right now, it's a cylinder, right, that tapers, and I want to, almost like a snake does, have like, it's not round all the time, as the muscles contract in it, there is a sort of, at times it gets a bit more boxy, other times it gets a bit rounder, and in here I just want to sort of push the gesture a little bit more. If I was to paint over this like this, for example, push the width, push the gesture, and so on. And I really want a little bit more of that for this guy in here. So that's something I would look to change, basically. I think something else, let's go back to these examples. Something else I definitely would like a bit of tension, a bit more tension in this tentacle here. Maybe even it wraps on the arm one more time in there. I think we need to see the restraint on that one. And maybe on this one in the background as well, we have it wrapping on the arm back here. Again, a lot of these could get a little bit more, gesture to them, inside and outside. Something else I'd like is like this space in the foreground here doesn't currently have anything in it. And I think it needs, something coming into the foreground here, whether that's like one of these tentacles that comes across and down, or we have something like, come on, I drew on the render, of course I did. 1 second. Tell I'm getting tired, just drawing on the wrong layer. How much time do you think you're going to spend on the illustration? Just curious, eh? Don't know. I mean, I'd like to finish it, right? I'd like to redo it and finish it. So as long as that takes, it really depends. But yeah, I like this coming into the foreground a little bit. This is nice. So this tentacle here that sort of goes out up and around, and then it, you know, is back up here. I quite like that, again, that foreshortening of it, and I think that'd be really nice to emphasize in the gesture, you know, kind of take those suckery bits and, you know, really have them going out and over in background. But there's like a bit of a tangent with this guy behind, where this tentacle goes this way and this dude is behind and comes out, and they sort of come out from the same angle. So I'd quite likely would keep that dude here like this, but maybe he comes down at a different angle, not interrupting the flow of that guy so much. He comes through like this, and that way this one can be understood as going up and behind, and this one here. Yeah, I still really like this one through the waist. I think this one could be quite nice with like some suckers on it. And I think this one would be really good with some kind of like open, not necessarily a mouth, you know, but like some kind of maw or something on the tentacle. Something like this. This guy coming up and around in here. This one could actually be a good candidate for the one that's been cut. So we could have, yeah, the two. It had been previously cut. The other bit flying off. Something like this. And then, yeah, we'd have loads going on in the background. So we'd want more tentacles and shit going on in the background there. But yeah, this dude, he's in dire straits. He's in a bad way. So yeah, those are the kind of things that I'm looking at in here to try and change. And then it's just like, where do we change them? Do we change them in the 3D? Do we change them in Photoshop? Like what's the best at this point? And like I think this render has a nice amount of information that if I was to sort of cut this out into its own separate layers, there'd be enough information here, I think, for me to start actually going into painting. I might want to go in and, you know, alter some of this, but ultimately there's a decent amount of information to continue with. Yeah, one thing I would probably do is go back to the render and just see if we can get a better reference for the kind of material in here. Just basically render him out as just like a gold blob and give us kind of nice lighting reference in there. But there is some really nice lighting already. And a lot of the tentacles in the far background we can just paint in. You know, that's the nice thing about this now, is like a lot of that stuff could just be all painted. Really dig this kind of rim light as well. picks up, you know, these suckers of the tentacle quite nice. So we could do something similar here. A lot of things going on. Yeah, we'd have like the water could be kind of more sort of goopy, so on. Even smaller tentacles and stuff. Like, I wanted this idea that these weren't necessarily all from the same thing. These are like, you know, all sorts of kind of like worms and stuff that are coming up to feed. Could also be nice with a bit of a tilt, maybe. Yeah, I can imagine this one having a sort of an opening like this, like a sort of a mouth, right? That's got teeth on the edge. Maybe even there's like those kind of proboscis-y bits that come out from the inside. And this stuff would be like a bit translucent as well, so you know what I mean? Hang on. So we'd get lots of this. And there'd be lots of this all over everything, like, you know, drippy, sticky, snotty, snotty worms. And then what I would do is where it's thinner here, and to introduce a little bit of extra color, these sort of translucent bits. You know what I mean? There'd be something like this. So it's got a sort of like translucent kind of webbing-y mouth bit. Like that. You know, all that kind of cool stuff on these designs. But yeah, it's nice to just grab the render kind of out of Blender at this point and just be like, okay, this could be this could be this, and basically just make a little plan, you know. Because what has it been? 2 hours and 20 minutes? So we're in a good spot if we were coming up with thumbnails, you know. That's the other thing that's good about knocking that out quickly in 3D, is that if I want to figure out a different angle, I can just hop back into Blender and move stuff around, right? And I've got another shot. But yeah, all those like kind of pustules, right? They could all be a bit translucent. So on these. So I'm just I'm just roughly going over this stuff to think about ideas for where we go. And then don't forget, we could have a lot of volumetrics as well, so we could separate a little bit more of this out value-wise, so we get a little bit more depth here and there. Yeah, maybe this dude even comes in from deeper. I can't listen because I'm on the phone, but I had to say that looks insanely cool, like a Stargate Quad. Right, okay. Yeah, I'm just mucking around on the doodles front because we only got 5 minutes left. But yeah, this is how I conceive of working like this a bit more. Jumping between programs to basically get the best out of each one, to conceive of an illustration. And basically, yeah, I would just take this and paint over it. So I think what we'll do tomorrow is I'll just do like some little tweaks in Blender, kind of move stuff around, maybe even duplicate a few more of these tentacles around, and play slightly with the materials just so that we have something interesting in the renders. And yeah, I may even try another lighting. It was quite interesting with the top down, you know. Quite interesting with the top down as well. I just wonder if the backlighting looks a little too heroic, you know. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like the backlighting makes it look like he's sort of a bit more powerful. So we'll play around with the lighting a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, it could be. It could be. What was quite nice about the top down is that it's quite isolating. It really feels quite oppressive, you know. So yeah, we'll play around with it tomorrow. But yeah, otherwise I'm into the general composition. It still has the same sort of spiraling kind of energy that the other one had, you know, but it has a bit more of a sophisticated use of space and so on. which is already better in this than the previous one. But yeah, I think we'll work on the lighting. I do really like the backlight. I honestly really do, but it maybe goes against the narrative a little bit. We'll see. We'll see. We'll play around. All right then. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope you found that helpful. Maybe it seems a bit chaotic to you guys. But yeah, this is basically a kind of a workflow that I'm trying to conceive of, whereby you can, get results quite quickly, and you switch from program to program to sort of get the best out of each one, and then we can have something really good to paint over, and then the painting process is just becomes the fun part at the end, because everything's already sorted and you're just making it look nice. But all right, catch you tomorrow. Peace out.